Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use Dolby technology to express themselves, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. We're here in Austin, Texas at South by Southwest at Rivian's Electric Roadhouse. We got the Dolby Atmos Airstream behind us, giving people experience of what it is to create in Dolby Atmos. And this particular session is on empowering creatives through Dolby Atmos, and it's led by my colleague at the Dolby Creator Lab, Ben Givars.
So happy to share the stage with this amazing group of creatives and ask them to introduce themselves, starting here with Geneva.
I'm Geneva.
I'm Annalee.
I'm Justice.
I'm Jim Eno. Should I say a little bit about myself here? I play in a band called Spoon, but I also have a recording studio. I used to live in Austin for about 30 years, and I recently moved to Providence, Rhode Island. Give it up for Providence, Rhode Island. Yeah, I've been producing records, mixing, and I have a Dolby Atmos studio in my place in Rhode Island.
I'm Sarah Hauser. I'm an Austin-based touring and session musician. I've been a part of the music community here for about 15 years. My artist name is S.L. Hauser, but you can call me Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. Let me stick with you for a minute, Sarah, you and Jim, because one of the things we're here to celebrate and to really highlight is Project Traction, which is a nonprofit organization, Jim, that you started here in Austin. And there's an amazing Austin story here with your roots and your history here. Could you share a little bit about Project Traction, the mission and goals?
So I run a nonprofit called Project Traction. The mission is to try to get gender equality in the studio. That's the main mission. So if there's some pretty scary statistics out there as far as like if you look at gender in the studio, and there's a number, it's about 5% women in the production field, which is pretty much mind-blowing because, I don't know, I work with so many great women, gender expansive musicians that it's just, I can't believe it's 5%. So anyway, the way, what we're trying to do is enable and mentor women and gender expansive musicians to bring them over into the production field. So that's the main mission of Project Traction. And the way we do that, maybe what I should do is talk about, so Sarah went through the program here in Austin. I worked on 6 tracks with 6 new producers. I had worked with Sarah in the studio. I'm like, you can produce, let's do it together, you know? So I asked her to basically join Project Traction with me. And so what did we do? We found an artist, right? Lizzie Lehman.
Lizzie Lehman, yeah, who is an Austin-based musician as well, and somebody that I had long admired. And we went through kind of a few different songs, picked a song.
Yeah, like solicit demos. So Lizzie sent us that, and it's sort of standard production stuff where you solicit demos, you work on pre-production. So Sarah and I worked together, and then we worked with Lizzie and sort of worked on the track. So then we went in the studio, we recorded it, and I mixed it, and it came out as a standalone track. So the other thing we do with Project Traction is we release every song individually to be able to highlight the producer, which is something that doesn't usually happen with recorded music these days. So Sarah had her own release with Lizzie, and I did 6 songs in Austin, and then I moved to Rhode Island, and I started working with this company called the Music District out of Fort Collins, Colorado. Now the next 6 songs are all gonna be Northern Colorado based. My co-producer for this track, her name is Miranda Fling, but she was my co-producer, and this is Autumnal, the band that we chose to produce for Project Traction.
Yeah, give it up for Autumnal. And thank you so much for being here. Geneva, can you share a little bit about the background of the band and sort of how you got together in beautiful Fort Collins? And the two of you are childhood friends, right? So there's an amazing connection there, I'm sure.
Yeah, so Annalee and I met in 5th grade. We've been singing in choir together since 5th grade and so on. And then we started writing our own songs, maybe
like 15. We started kind of by street performing when we were like 14, playing songs on ukulele, just kind of improvising harmonies and stuff, and kind of learned each other's voices, and then eventually started writing our own songs. And we started a band, what this band is now, but it was under a different name, and it was just the two of us, singer-songwriter type of vibe. But kind of once COVID happened, we changed our name. I learned guitar in Geneva, started playing synth, and we kind of grew up into the new band, into the new sound that we have now. And we brought Justice on for bass, and we also have a drummer back home, Nina, who we took from another band, and she drums for us now. So, yeah.
So you describe your sound as fuzz folk, is that right? So I think that's such a cool combination. Why don't you share a little bit about sort of what that means and who some of your influences are and how you kind of approach the writing process?
So we kind of picked the name because still at our roots, we are kind of folky songwriters, I would say. We have a lot of story-based songs and we have a lot of lyrics in our songs. So kind of taking that folk idea and then bringing a new sound to it, using pedals and more recently the synth to kind of add new texture and our own inspirations to it.
Some of our earlier inspirations back when it was just the two of us was Dodie and other singer-songwriter folk types. And then over time we've kind of shifted some of our influences to be Big Thief and Indigo D'Souza and other artists. And Sylvanesso.
That for sure.
Yeah, so we've just kind of adapted a bunch of different sounds into what at our roots, like you said, was a folk bass.
And Justice, you're holding it together on bass there. You've got kind of a funky groove sort of sound to it. What are some of your influences? How do you approach songwriting?
Yeah, so I guess our process a lot of the time is either Geneva or Annalee or kind of both have an idea for a song, kind of lyrics or some basic chords, and then I kind of just try to come in and support and enhance what's there. I don't know, I take a lot of inspiration from Tina Weymouth from Talking Heads, that kind of vibe.
Hear that?
I like that a lot. Yeah, and just kind of listening around to other a lot of the influences that they mentioned, honestly, have really great supporting bass that I'm inspired by. Indigo D'Souza, Daisy the Great is another great one.
So you've had 4 tracks before Breathing, and listening to all of those, I can definitely hear a progression. And I think with Breathing, you can kind of hear it all sort of coming together. There's a lot of kind of low end, and it kind of really drops. Can you share a little bit about the inspiration behind the song and sort of the message that you're kind of sending?
Yeah, sure. So the story that really inspired Breathing was earlier this year, I moved into a new house and I started growing a garden. It was a very time-consuming project, and I had to till up everything and build up the garden beds. And yeah, the plants finally sprouted, and then I went on tour, and when I came back, the garden was dead. And I remember my first instinct being wow, what a waste of time. Because I just spent so much time and energy trying to grow this garden. And then something clicked around that point where I just started I guess internalizing a reframe of that mindset, which is when I think about it, what actually was happening was I spent hours and hours in the sun, getting vitamin D, putting my hands in the soil, and just sitting in the yard with my dog. And that's definitely something that I enjoyed. So even though the end product wasn't something tangible, it definitely wasn't a waste of time. And that's where the line in the chorus is, "If I'm breathing, it's not a waste of time," comes in. And over the last, I guess, yeah, since the course of the song, I've been kind of holding on to that little mantra, trying to help validate all of the craziness of this very fast-paced world, and just reminding myself that whatever you're doing is already enough. Your body is breathing. You're taking care of yourself just by being alive, and you're exactly where you need to be, and you're doing enough. Is kind of where the mindset of that song comes from.
I love that. Very wise words there. Absolutely. So, Jim, as you're approaching pre-production and then producing this along with Miranda, what was your take on kind of hearing this song compared to some of the other ones, and what direction did you want to take it?
They sent me and Miranda 3 songs, I think. And usually what happens when you get demos from a band and you only have to do one, you sort of gravitate towards one. And both Miranda and I both gravitated towards Breathing. I guess for me, it was all the cool synth parts and how that interacted with the melody and the lyrics. I felt it was a fairly stripped down demo, but there was a lot of chord tracks that you had already written, but there was really cool interactions and everything. So I don't know, I feel like that we were both like, let's do this one. I hope the band lets us do this one.
I love the interplay between the two vocals and how it kind of builds, but there's really an amazing breakdown moment in it as well that's got some field recordings and some found sounds and a lot of really cool effects that happen. What was the thought process around kind of having that break in the middle of the song that's really unexpected, quite frankly, right?
Yeah, we were kind of thinking of it as there's a breathing exercise that's going in the background, square breathing. And so we kind of were thinking that as at the beginning, it's a person kind of very overwhelmed, very anxious. So there's a lot of industrial noises that we took from when we were in New York, some talking when we were at a museum, and just kind of ambient background noises. And as the breathing exercise goes on, you kind of more calm down, and we bring in water from Rhode Island, a beach in Rhode Island when we were on tour.
Rhode Island.
Yes, and
Cicadas from Memphis.
yes, cicadas from Memphis, and kind of, just collections of sounds from our tours, and making that kind of calm down into the nature sounds before the chorus comes back in.
And I feel like from a production standpoint, we talked about like giving the song a little bit of a breath away, so the drums drop out, sort of you go into more of the patty synthy stuff, which sort of inherently it makes you slow down and feel like the air in the track. So I feel like it sort of all worked together, the songwriting with the production.
And so, Jim, you mentioned you've moved your studio to Rhode Island now, but it's an Atmos studio, and you've been mixing in Atmos and working in Atmos for quite a few years now. Can you share a little bit about your approach to music like this, which is very, very emotional and has a lot of feeling in it, a lot of dynamic instruments and synths and movement, and how you sort of think about creating an immersive environment to allow what they're doing to reach their fans in new ways?
I always start with the stereo mix, so I'll mix a track in stereo, then I'll bring it into my Atmos studio, and I'll spend a lot of time making sure that the Atmos mix matches the stereo mix, just usually on headphones, because on services, if you're getting served a song, you don't really know if it's Atmos or not, or the common listener doesn't. So I want to at least have that as a starting point. And then, as opposed to mixing in stereo can be difficult because there's only two speakers, so you have to fit every single sound inside this very sort of narrow sort of spectrum. So when you mix, you always get someone like, drummer wants more hi-hat or something like that, or, more tambourine or something. So you have to like find places for these things, carve a lot of frequencies out. So within two speakers, you can hear everything. Now with Atmos now, I have a 9.1.4 system. Now all of a sudden I have like 13 speakers at my disposal. And to me, it's very fun and very creative because there's so much space. So when you listen to a Atmos mix on a speaker system, you will definitely hear things that you never heard in a stereo mix because they're not cramped together. Also, with stereo mixing, you have to take priorities. So I like to use the analogy, I didn't come up with this one, but everyone's been to New York City, you've heard of it, right? So if you ever, like coming into New York City, imagine if every building was the same height, same size, and just, every building looked the same. It wouldn't be as exciting to drive into New York and see that. The thing that's exciting about, seeing something like that is the Empire State Building with the little bodega down there with the lights. All this stuff adds up to a really cool thing that you go into when you see the city, right? I look at mixing the same way. So you have to have priorities, okay, lead vocal, that's the Empire State Building. Sorry, drummer, but your hi-hat is going to be the, bodega down at the bottom. Sorry about that, Obviously, we talk with the band and, these are creative decisions, but you have to make priorities with that. With Atmos, you can actually take more freedom and liberties and be able to hear more things around the stereo, actually 360 spectrum, I guess, or so, anyway, that's my thought behind mixing and Atmos. So
I would say in this track specifically, we have a bunch of beach umbrellas. If we were to talk about like, the
totally,
landscape, there'd be a lot of beach umbrellas.
different colored beach umbrellas.
Yeah.
I also think the Atmos thing, I'm very new to Atmos, admittedly, but when you guys were talking about it, and my experience with it too is that I feel like some of our first music memories are dealing with acoustics. You're in church, or I had a piano teacher that made me go to the symphony, but that feeling of music being all around you and all encompassing is such a special feeling, and it was for sure my first drug of choice as a child. And it really just seems like Atmos is nurturing that. At some point in all our lives, music became very linear, very stereo, very left, right, very mono even in a way. And this is bringing back that multiple level of experiencing music, which is that you can hear stuff over there and you can hear stuff over there and hear stuff over there and feel it under your feet. And that's a very cool thing to see.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that is really what it's about, to help the creative connect with their listener. And it does reveal emotion. It reveals articulation and detail and nuance in the music that sometimes is impossible when you just have left and right. And so I'm sure folks know, but when you're mixing in Dolby Atmos, you're no longer confined to a number of speakers or specific space. You're placing objects around an environment, and the creative decisions that you make are going to translate and scale and play back to whatever the playback environment is. That's the beauty of the metadata in the Atmos mix. And you did some really interesting and creative things with vocals that I think allow movement and to really accentuate what was happening. Like the bass is really like in the pocket and in the bed, if you will. Can you
really loud?
Can you share a little bit about kind of how you treat instruments and so that they've got that punch and retain that glue, and when it's played back in a consumer environment, it's going to maintain that artistic integrity?
Right. Well, I'm usually doing some compression on instruments, to try to tone them down and not have as many peaks. I want to try to keep like your spikes aren't all over the place. So I'll do some compression. But also within Atmos, a lot of it has to do, at least to me, is just placement. Placing things around and then using levels to be able to sit things correctly. So everyone should go in this little Airstream and check out stuff, because like on this song on Breathing that we did do some things that showcased a lot of what Dolby Atmos can do, like things moving around you. I have like sort of synths coming backwards to forwards to create movement. We have a sub on the bass. We have like a widener too. So I don't know. It's pretty neat to go in there and to hear it. So.
Yeah, and I mean, your first time hearing it in Atmos was in the Airstream as well. Can you share a little bit about your reaction to that moment? I saw your faces light up. I saw a lot of nodding, a lot of smiling, a lot of play it again.
I definitely think we should all share a little bit about this. Something that I really enjoyed was listening to the field recordings soloed in the track, since there's such a range of sounds from like industrial machinery to like gentle bird sounds. Hearing them all like at once in the same space with the surround sound was so interesting, because it really like was very immersive. But it's so interesting to hear like the contrast between them all at once. It's such an interesting environment to be placed in.
I definitely really enjoyed the vocals. Both of us kind of serve as lead singer, we say, and I think we run into a lot, especially in the live area, where engineers don't quite know how to do that and kind of prefer to make one of us the lead over the other. But the point is that we're both. And so, yeah, kind of with the extra space, we were able to Jim was able to put us in different spaces to kind of let us both have that equal lead, that equal part, but still not be too overcrowded, and it sounded really cool.
A couple things that I really love that you did with like placement was firstly the vocal effects, placing the long delay kind of in the back, the rear speakers, so you have kind of the main vocals up front, and then almost feels like it's rolling over you like waves, kind of.
Right. Yeah.
And then the synth sub, the 808, kind of going into the first chorus there. starts at the back and it kind of starts low and goes up gradually and forward as it does, brings like such good energy there.
Yeah, you can automate stuff within Atmos too. So you can use the movement of a sound to create like excitement and stuff. So I had a low end sound sweep into the first chorus or yeah, so that was fun.
I think one of the most exciting things about Dolby Atmos today is that there are so many enabled systems and services that the consumer and the music fan can listen to Dolby Atmos on. So, Rivian, obviously an amazing way to hear Atmos in a speaker-based environment. There are 20 streaming music services now globally delivering Dolby Atmos music. So it's a really exciting time, and that's just going to continue to grow. But one of the coolest things about the creation side is that the tools are accessible. So anyone can download the Dolby Atmos renderer and plug in headphones to a laptop and start going straight away. So I'd encourage you to do that, but I would absolutely encourage you to check out the Rivian experience as well, streaming through Apple Music. What excites you all about the future of the band and the future of immersive audio and Dolby Atmos specifically? And I would love to hear what's next with Project Traction.
The thing, most listeners hear Dolby Atmos now on headphones, which is fine, but I feel like I'm mixing on a multi-speaker system, 9.1.4, and if you think about it, we all drive around in our cars all the time. Cars have multiple speakers. The fact that the Rivian car supports Dolby Atmos, the consumer can now hear music that I mix closer to how I want it to be heard. Okay? So that cool white guy over there, the Rivian car is like, that's the one that plays the Dolby Atmos. So I would recommend getting into that and hearing
the R1S.
Yeah, and to hear the experience you can get from that. So I don't know. I'm really excited about this technology moving into the car space because I feel like it is a way to experience what we do as creative mixers, producers, musicians, as we intend to hear it.
And automobiles are just one way to experience it. Mobile devices with headphones, smart speakers. There are actually over 3.5 billion enabled devices in the marketplace. So you probably have one in your pocket and are able to hear Autumnal on Apple Music. So Sarah, can you share a little bit about what you're working on? I know you're doing education, you're doing performance, you've been on tour. She barely made it here, folks. She was on the road playing a gig and was able to get here to share her experiences with us.
My tie into this group is that I was in that first round of producers for Project Traction, an experience that I'm forever grateful for and very changed by. I think the biggest hurdle for a lot of women in this side of the industry is just getting in the room and getting the opportunity to show our skill set. This opportunity came at a time where I was noticing that most of the sessions I was in, I was the only woman. Most of the touring bands I knew out of Boston were only hiring men. So I think across the spectrum, creating spaces for gender expansive people is super important. What I've been working on since Project Traction was I produced a whole full-length album for the artist that I produced in the program, Lizzie Lehman. And I've just kind of continued to nurture the studio side of my resume, which is largely writing strings arrangements, working more on the production side. I do not have a technical engineering background, and for me that was my mental block with the studio space, like, oh, surely I cannot produce because I don't know how to run a board. And what I learned through this program was that is this much of what's actually going into it, and that a lot of the ideas I was having within my own songwriting and doing session work for other artists were production ideas. And so I've just continued to really develop that and push that side of my life.
Give it up for Project Traction. Absolutely. We have the show coming up, but what's in the future for Autumnal? What are you all excited about? Is there a record, a full length on the way?
We have a lot of songs, mostly recorded, hopefully a record this year. We definitely would love to also release more stuff in Dolby or even our back catalog. We're playing a lot of shows this week around Austin. You can talk to us or look at our Instagram for where we'll be. We're also heading up to Treefort Fest in Boise and the end of March. So we, have a lot of exciting things coming up.
One of the most exciting things is that people are actually creating original music in Atmos now. So now that you've heard it, you're probably thinking, how can we go into this with an immersive experience in mind? So really excited to see what you come up with next. Jim, what's next for you and what are you excited about?
We have a lot going on. I have some tours coming up with Spoon, but I'm going to be focusing a lot on Project Traction. We are now a full nonprofit. We have cards over there for donations or listening to the tracks, or for our Instagram if you want to follow us and follow the progress of this program. So, it's going to be in the studio,
Thanks to Ben for hosting that great conversation on empowering creatives with Dolby Atmos, and to our partners at Rivian and the Rivian Electric Roadhouse here in Austin, Texas at South by Southwest 25. If you'd like even more conversations about artists, about how they use technology, be sure you're subscribed to Dolby Creator Talks. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube and our show notes, or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can subscribe to our mailing list, and you can access the entire library of episodes of this podcast. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Marroquin. Thanks for joining us.